Hell yeah, it looks like we are live. It is your boy CFB Season back with another live show tonight. Hope everyone's doing well. Want to welcome in a special guest that we have. Thank you for so much for giving us your time and joining in on the show tonight. Goes by the name Any Given Saturday. Follow him on Twitter. Man, what's up?
Hey, what's going on, man? Appreciate being able to sit down on the show. It's making this way towards the start college football season. Go just a little bit faster. So I appreciate it.
Man, speaking of that, how's your off season going, man? How's your off season going so far?
You you know what? This has been it's been an interesting off season for sure. Because I mean, just like a few months ago, I just became a dad. I have a 5 month old like son. First child. So it's been very fun being able to interact with him every day, and makes things makes this long wait that we have to August 23rd just a little bit easier. So, but it's been a really good off season, man. I can't complain. I really can't.
So you just got a son. He's gonna be a football player, huh?
Well, we'll see about that. We're at least we're shooting for a Division 1 athlete. But you
Yeah.
know, he can play whatever. But
Scrap up them pads, boy.
it's really interesting actually because like while we were sitting in the hospital, one like the first things that I did, like I think the first full day is I think everyone has seen like the Tavon Austin highlight mixtape on YouTube, right? So that was one of his first things that he saw when he was able to open up his eyes for say is that Tavon Austin highlight tape. Yes, sir.
I might have to steal that idea in the future, bro.
There you go.
I might have to Tavon Austin highlight tape playing coming out the womb, man. So let's give the audience a little perspective on you. How and why you got started kind of with like the college football content, your channel, your show, your content and all that stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually like pretty new, like overall to the Twitter sphere. I do go by Any Given Saturday on Twitter, but this actually isn't my very first time, like doing content in any capacity, right? So, and for those that are like a little bit more familiar with like John Jake Gaming, I used to do more of that college gaming content for a few years. But what happened was shortly after my son was born, I was really like torn between, trying to maintain that channel and, making sure that I'm spending time with my son and making sure that my wife has what she needs. So I ultimately walked away from that. But as I was on paternity leave, because I was blessed with that paternity leave, we still had that creative itch. And so that was how like creative Any Given Saturday came to be. We had this around for over a year, but it was more of a side piece. But we've only been taking it really seriously the past few months. So, I mean, just been enjoying every day and just really looking forward to, what the rest of the off season has in store, as well as this upcoming football season, man. Should be a good one.
I mean, they just released the times for week one. That
I,
got to figure up.
I know I saw the like the release from FBS schedule. Shout out to him. He's been a great source and
FBS schedules every year. I do a tweet. It's like a yearly appreciation tweet for FBS schedules.
Absolutely. I saw that they're going to release the rest of the like week 0 through 3 later
Yep.
this month, and I mean I already tweeted back at him, but man, I need the rest of those kickoff times. Like I need oxygen.
I've seen that. I laughed at that when I saw that. What are you looking forward to the most this upcoming season, man?
Oh, you know what? So I mean, couple of things, both on and off the field, right? So on the field, I think since I've been partially covering back in 2023, that's when I've had my like internal power rating model really start kicking up around 2023. I think this year is probably going to be the most open that we've seen in terms of who we think is going to win a national championship. I don't think we are going to have a clear favorite. And I think that's just as a kind of like a repercussion of what we've seen from the NIL and transfer portal era. I
Mhm.
mean, just look around the country real quick. I mean, Penn State, are they going to have enough balance offensively to elevate themselves as a national championship contender? And same thing for like a Clemson in Miami. They clearly have the offensive firepower. Can they improve defensively? Texas and Ohio State, I mean, they have really strong rosters, but unproven at the quarterback position. I mean, there's several teams like that realistically could make a run at the national championship. I just named 6 right there. And with that being said, if I really sat down and thought about it, there probably could be maybe even a dozen teams that really could make a run for his national championship at the end of the day.
I wonder if that might be the new norm of college football. We kind of seen it hitting us a little bit last season, how there's no more really undefeated teams. I know Oregon went undefeated in the regular season, but it's like the parity. It's a lot more parity. This is what everyone that was favoring this system was wanting, and that's obviously what's on display. So we've got about a dozen teams fighting for the championship. It's wide open in your eyes. And you said you got your own model that you was doing, huh? You mentioned?
Yeah, so we do have an internal power rating system that we do maintain. So we're combing through like a lot of the what's happened in the spring transfer portal was a pretty insane period. So we're combing through that right now, and hopefully somewhere in like the late July, like early August timeframe, we can get that wrapped up. Start releasing some preseason top 25. Because I know that's never been seen as clickbaity whatsoever.
Hey, did you see Josh Pate's top 25?
You know what? I actually did take a look at his top 20. So at first, I presumed that it was his power ratings, because he's always gone by the when he releases those kind of rankings, it's usually like going off of his JP poll. So ignorantly, I went in there like, guys, this is probably what the model thinks. Let's relax a little bit. And then he actually replied to me directly. He's like, "Nah, this is my rank." It's like, "Oh, okay." So yeah, I've seen that. I know that it's gotten a lot of attention for sure, which I'm not surprised about. He's one of the bigger creators in our inner sphere. So
yeah, we got a person that's in our community. I don't know if you follow him or know of him. Is FB in the boot, his account, football in the boot.
Yeah, I did. I actually just started tuning in and following them a couple of days ago. So yeah,
he's great with the models. Y'all definitely need to connect this season and share your thoughts and all that stuff. Definitely though, that's going to be something to look forward to for sure. Let's see. What's your thoughts on this new rumor on the new playoffs and like going to 16 and the auto bids for the SEC, the Big Ten, all that stuff that just came out recently?
All right, so I'm gonna put this aside. The expansion itself from 12 to 16 teams. I mean, I know that this first year we had the expansion from 4 to 12 teams, and I thought the playoff was awesome. I really enjoyed the home playoff games on campus, and I know expanding to 16 teams would expand the number of home games that we would have in terms of like a playoff atmosphere. I think that was really awesome. That being said, let's get to this auto bid system. If you really sit down and think about it, like the Big Ten and the SEC, they do not need 4 auto bids, I think, on a yearly basis, especially if you're going to sit here and tell us that you're the best conferences in college football.
Right.
You don't need 4 automatic bids and then just kind of have that disparity. Now, me personally, and I kind of talked about this on Twitter a little bit, if I was college football commissioner, if I was ever sitting in that chair, I would actually adopt the FCS playoff model. I would go to a 24-team model like the FCS has, down at the lower end of Division 1. So you would get your 9 auto bids, 1 for each conference, 10 once Pac-12 gets to a point where they have at least 8 teams in their conference. Hopefully they get there next year. And then you would have your 15 auto bids. You would also do a straight ranking. So once you have your 24 teams in the field, you just rank among those 24, 1 through 24. The idea of just because you win your conference, you should get a bye. I love Arizona State. I love Boise State, but I think you and I can be completely honest here. Those 2 teams were not top 4 teams in the country last year. I think you and I can both agree, even though, I have a soft spot for Arizona State. I have a soft spot for for Boise State. I think Ashton Jeanty should have won a Heisman Trophy. That's just my opinion. I might be in the minority. But yeah, do a strength ranking 1 through 24. And no matter if you're a fan of a Big Ten or an SEC school, or if you're root for a G5 school, a 2014 model with one auto bid per conference would be a win-win for everybody. Because if you're the Big Ten and the SEC, even if you just have that one auto bid, you're going to get at least 4 teams in the playoff every year. In the case of the SEC, for example, if we had the 2014 playoff last year, we would have seen 7 SEC teams in the playoff. Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina, that was barely on the outside looking in. They would have definitely got in. And then Missouri probably would have been one of your last at-larges. And you can even take a look back from 2014 to last season. So 11 seasons of data. The SEC would have had at least 4 teams in that kind of playoff format the last 11 years, with the exception of 1 year. Similar case for the Big 12. It would have been all but 2 seasons. So the SEC and the Big Ten, they would get their teams into the playoff, and we would do a little bit of a better job accounting for strength of schedule, because I know that's a big reason why they're pushing for the 4 auto bids in the first place. Yeah. Meanwhile, if you're a G5, you automatically get a seat at the table. And during the course of the regular season, you have more eyeballs on your conference, because the more casual and agnostic fan is going to pay attention to your G5 conference race, because some people are going to wonder, hey, who's going to win this auto bid from the Conference USA? Who's going to win this auto bid from the MAC? Like, for example, because I enjoy me some midweek action, but not everybody is as diehard as I am, for example. So it would be a win-win for everybody. Your G5s would be more represented at the table. In the Big Ten, the SEC, you would get your 4+ teams in every year anyways. So, I mean, it would be a win-win for everybody, and it would mean more home playoff games for everybody. So, I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah, that system that you proposing, would it be all home playoff games until the championship, or in?
So what I would do as the hypothetical college football commissioner in this kind of format, so your top 8 teams will get a bye into the second round, and so you would have home playoff games for like the first and second round. Higher seed will obviously host those particular playoff games, and then once you get into the quarterfinals, your final 8. That's when you would start seeing like your traditional like New Year's 6 bowls, and then like wherever you want to have the national championship everywhere. Personally, I think the Rose Bowl should get more love in terms of having national championship there. That's just my opinion.
I agree. I got the Rose Bowl number 1, the Sugar Bowl number 2. My top 2 New Year's 6 bowls.
But yeah, that what Raj Dellinger tweeted out, like I don't mind the playoff expansion, but the 4 auto bids for the top 2 conferences, I don't support it. I think most college football fans don't support it either, except a loud minority. But it is what it is.
No, you're right about that. I personally don't support it for sure. I come from the BCS era, basically. That's what I was growing up on. So people laugh at me, but I'll say go back to the BCS era,
Listen, I mean, I remember getting sports consciousness around like 2004, 2005. So, I mean, I grew up also in that BCS era as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly was not perfect. I mean, like it would create its own set of controversies, over the years if it was still around. But I mean, at least it did a little bit of a better job accounting for strength of schedule, in my opinion, than getting a committee together.
So I've been keeping up with a lot of your posts lately, and you've been doing a lot of breakdowns on the schedules and, talking about some ceilings and floors for some teams.
Yeah.
So I think this next segment we could jump into could be on a few teams we could talk about for this season coming up. Let's see. The first team we're going to talk about, man, what's your thoughts about Indiana, bro? Indiana coming off 11-1 last season with, they exceeded expectations massively year 1. So a lot of people are sleeping on them. I'm not seeing too much love for Indiana in year 2 of Kurt Cignetti. But what you thinking right here for Indiana this season?
Yeah, so I mean, I think everybody was surprised by how well Indiana performed over the course of the season. I mean, they end up going 11-2, and really their two losses, if you really think about it, their two losses came to teams that ultimately played in the national championship game. So, Indiana they got bounced in the first round of college football playoff. They got, bruised up by Notre Dame in that first round. But I mean, honestly, if they were matched up against a different team, they could have gone a little bit further in the college football playoff in the first round. And it was also one of those things too, where I think even if you got the most optimistic Indiana fan in the room right here, right now, they would not tell you with a straight face they're going to win 11 games this upcoming season, like looking back at last year. So, I mean, it's a massive overperforming of expectations. Me personally, I thought if they just made a bowl game last year, that's a really good year.
Yeah.
But now that we know that, Kirk Cinetti, like, he made those Google Meet comments, he backed it up. I think now, we're in a spot where people are not going to be able to sleep on Indiana here in 2025. So really the two biggest things for Indiana going into this season is, as a program who has not historically had very much success, how do you handle those expectations moving forward? And then secondarily, they did lose Curtis Rourke to the NFL, but they did do a good job. They brought in Fernando Mendoza through the transfer portal, got some starting experience at Cal. And I think he possibly could be better than Curtis Rourke this season. I'm very high on what Mendoza can do, especially being in an offensive-friendly system like Cignetti's. But third, in Traditieri, did also lose C.J. West. So you're probably going to see that rush defense probably take a little bit of step back, quietly one of the better rush defenses in the nation. So how much of a step back do you take there, I think, is really going to determine how good Indiana is going to be this year. I think the floor for Indiana is a little bit higher than what we saw in 2024 with Kirk Cinetti being in his second year, so being able to instill his system and instill his culture as a head coach. So I could see them really as an 8 to 9 win team. Don't have them as that 11-1 ceiling personally, but I think 8 to 9 wins would be pretty safe. And listen, I mean, they do have a little bit more difficult of a schedule than they did last season, right? We're talking about taking on Illinois at home. I mean, Illinois definitely getting a lot of love this offseason with all that return production. We might talk about them a little bit later. You got Iowa on the road. Iowa quietly one of the tougher environments to play in. You got to go across the country to play Oregon for a conference game. Brother. Like, so, and then you also have Penn State on the road as well. So I see those 3 games being losses. At least seeing them lose 3 of those 4 games between like Illinois, Iowa, at Oregon and at Penn State. But I do think this team is a little bit more talented than they were last year. It's just the thing is they also have a more difficult schedule than last year. So it's going to be hard for Indiana to make it back to the college football playoff. But if they, get to that 9-3 and, finish the season strong, maybe pull off a signature win against Oregon or a Penn State, maybe they could, sneak into that discussion when it comes to like early November, one of those teams.
I agree with you. I'm going 9-3 myself personally for Indiana. That's my outlook for them this year. I think Oregon gets them. I think Illinois gets them. And I think Penn State gets them. Now, Iowa on the road, that one's going to be tricky too, like how you said. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt there. But I'm going to go 9-3 for Indiana this year.
Yeah, and it is also going to depend on how Iowa is offensively as well. I mean, we know how Iowa's defense is going to be this upcoming season. It's just the real question is, can they execute a forward pass? But if Iowa can execute a forward pass, I mean, that's going to be a tricky game for Indiana because Iowa's always physical, and they're going to be coming off another physical game. I think, like going up against Illinois as well a very experienced Illinois team too. So that little 2-game trip in like late September, like I said, could be tricky. But yeah, I mean, like 8-4 and 9-3, very very reasonable. And they'll probably be a team that will be ranked consistently in the top 25 polls for the college football playoff as well as the AP.
I hope they don't bite me because I'm not ranking them in my preseason top 25. I'm not showing too much love to Indiana, but it is what it is. Let's stay in the Big Ten. All right. Next team we're going to talk about, my dark horse in the Big Ten, Illinois. Again, a lot of hype, like you said. So what's their ceiling and floor?
Yeah, Illinois. I mean, we just talked about them while previewing like the Indiana Hoosiers, like their outlook, right? I mean, one of the teams where they're very close to the top in terms of returning production. I mean, I think only Clemson has more returning production than Illinois has. Don't know if they're number 2, but they're certainly in the top 5. They will need to find a replacement for the production of Pat Bryant, who did end up going to the NFL. They did have some other receivers that didn't necessarily get drafted, but did get picked up as undrafted free agents. But Luke Altmaier, one of the more experienced quarterbacks in this conference, at least a top 4 quarterback in the Big Ten in Luke Altmaier. And while they didn't have, the flashy pulls in the transfer portal, do like what they got in the transfer portal in James Thompson Jr. So again, another one of those things where can Illinois manage the expectations? They popped off a 10-win season last year. And you know what? You talked about them being a dark horse. I agree. I think there is a world where Illinois can go undefeated and run the table in the regular season. I'll say it right here, right now, in the month of May, because I'm looking at the schedule right now. I have schedule right in front of me. It's a very navigatable schedule. There's a couple of tricky games, going at Indiana. That would certainly be a fun game to watch, I think. But Ohio State's going to be their trickiest game of the season, but they have them at home. And right before that Ohio State game, they're going to play Purdue. So, I mean, they're going to be a little bit more rest. It's not like they're going to be physically challenged. No disrespect to the Purdue Boilermakers by any means. But Ohio State at home, like that could be a trap game for the Buckeyes for sure. I have Ohio State favored here, but I have them favored by less than a touchdown. And especially, got the home crowd behind you. If everything goes right, they can pull that game off. Now, conversely, if they don't handle those expectations as well, there's also a world where I can see them being an 8-4 team as well, losing to Ohio State, possibly, dropping that game to Indiana as well. Duke even, I think Duke is, one of those teams that doesn't really get talked about in the national conversation, but, Duke had some nice portal additions over the course of the offseason as well. Going on the road to play against Washington, traveling across the country for that could be tricky. Going to Wisconsin on the road, Camp Randall, more difficult place to play. There is some games, you know what I'm saying? But there's not like games where there's not really a game on the schedule where you look at it and there's absolutely no shot for Illinois to win.
I agree with all that. That week 2 at Duke, would you consider that? I mean, would a trap game on week 2, is that too early for a trap game in your opinion, or you think that could still be considered a trap game?
I would think that it's a little bit too early for it to be considered still a trap game. Because I'm looking at who they have right afterwards. They'll have Western Michigan right afterwards. So if anything, Western Michigan could be considered, a little bit more of that trap game, because then after the Western Michigan game, you would have, Indiana on the road, USC at home, and then you would have like Ohio State a couple of weeks later. So Western Michigan, I would consider to be a little bit more of a trap game, even though Western Michigan certainly not the same caliber of team that like a Duke, Indiana, or even of a Purdue would be necessarily.
I have them undefeated going into that USC matchup in late September.
Yeah,
I'm still don't really know what to really expect from USC this upcoming season. It's hard for me to get really a true read on them. So but I do think USC is going to have some talent. And but I got Illinois on the like. I could see they do got a wide range kind of. I don't know. I don't think they go undefeated, but I do have them undefeated for half the schedule. And that Ohio State game is tricky. I love how they get them at home, and I think they're going to handle Washington. And I think they're going to handle Wisconsin later the year too. Like how you brought those two games up. Their back half schedule is not terrible at all. I think if they could scrape by past Ohio State with maybe only one loss, they're going to go 11-1. I think.
Yeah, and I mean, even though this may not be considered, that great of a schedule from a strength of schedule perspective, I think if you get to 11-1, that's certainly going to be more than enough to get into the college football playoff, especially now that we have a like a 12-team format, at least for this season. We'll see what happens after that. But yeah, I do like that Ohio State, is at least at home. If it was on the road, that would be one of those games where I would consider that likely a loss, but because it is at home,
they only get Ohio State. They don't get Michigan, Penn State,
Oregon. Oregon's not on the schedule either.
They don't get Oregon, so they're two. I guess their two toughest would be Ohio State, USC, and probably at Duke, and then we just talked about Indiana too. But I got them beating Indiana, but it's still going to be a tough game on the road, obviously. So they got kind of lucky with their schedule a little bit for the Big Ten's perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's something that does need to be addressed in college football because, I mean, I know like strength of schedule is an issue that needs to be addressed, especially within conferences because looking over to like the SEC real fast, I mean, like the difference in schedule that like an Oklahoma or Florida has, like, for example, compared to what a Tennessee will have to deal with in conference play. It's absolutely crazy the discrepancy that we have even within conferences. And I think it's like just having all these super conferences definitely does not help in that regard.
No, because not everyone can play each other.
Yeah,
that's what sucks. And I've been calling out presidents and ADs for a while now. Anyone who's been keeping up with me knows that I'm big on scheduling. And I feel like a lot of big time programs, not all, but I feel like a lot of big time programs don't schedule tough at all, especially non-conference. Now, what you get in conference, it is what it is, right?
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, like that's always something that is that's like set in stone, like years like down the road. So I mean, like we see the non-conference schedules, but like we don't realize that like this year's schedule, like the non-conference was probably set in stone in like 2014, 2015. It's just the nature of the beast sometimes.
All right, let's jump into. I got two teams from the Big 12. I want to get your outlook on. Let's see. First team we're going to talk about is Iowa State. Had a pretty solid year last year, returning their quarterback and running back. I think they lose their receivers as well, along with Illinois. But what's your thoughts on Iowa State? They got a big opener against K-State in Dublin.
Yes, sir. They're kicking off the college football season at high noon, so we love to see that. Listen, it's the Big 12. I mean, it seems like with this conference, ever since we had the most recent round of realignment, I mean, there's just all of the teams have like a lighter bit of volatility. I mean, Utah is a perfect example of that. I mean, there was a lot of people who were high on Utah last year, and they end up missing a bowl game. Same thing with Oklahoma State, and they end up going 3-9 while Arizona State was picked last in the Big 12, and they end up representing the conference in the college football playoff, giving Texas a run for their money. So I'm going into these next two previews just saying that I have no idea truly what's going to happen in the Big 12. I think it's the most unpredictable conference, I think, in all of college football. But if I had to lay it down, first and foremost, can we give Matt Campbell his flowers? Like, can we as a nation do that? I mean, we never
actually. I have a co-host. His name's Austin. He's a big fan of Campbell, and he thinks that he's going to take over USC in the future.
I mean, we'll see, because Matt Campbell has had opportunities at bigger jobs, but he's decided to stay put at Iowa State. Now, is he going to stay there forever? I truly don't know. Nobody knows really what the motivation of these head coaches are nowadays. But yeah, I mean, Iowa State, has a continuously underappreciated head coach in Matt Campbell. Quietly one of the best head coaches in college football. Nobody talks about him because he's located out in Ames, Iowa. I don't think anyone can point Ames on a map. If we're being honest with ourselves, we're not a big geography country. But in addition to that, Matt Campbell has done a really good job of just kind of really embracing like the transfer portal. I love his methodology, not going for big transfer portal classes, but finding guys that really fit what Iowa State is all about. Not really a lot of high marquee guys, but they did bring in like a Chase Soul, a wide receiver out of Eastern Carolina. That's going to really help Rocco Beck in the passing game this year, because they do lose Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll both to the NFL as second-round draft picks. So I really think they nailed it in the portal. They got, Rocco back. They got some good talent coming back as well. I think for Iowa State, I think the expectation is to compete for that Big 12 championship. So for me, Iowa State is another one of those teams where I think could actually go undefeated this upcoming season. Now, Kansas State, I think, is certainly going to be a toss-up. Farmageddon, rivalry game in very first game of the season. I truly don't know what's going to happen. But looking at the schedule, I mean, their toughest, Big 12 games, with the exception of, maybe TCU on the road. They do have BYU at home, and they also are going to get Arizona State at home. So this is a very, this is a type of schedule that, you'll be able to like work through without too many issues. I also like how their bye weeks are broken out as well. There's never a point in the year where you have more than 4 games before a bye. So that's going to be extremely helpful as well.
I'm looking.
Iowa State being an undefeated team. And then like my 4 personally, again, it's the Big 12. It's a little bit more unpredictable. I could also see Iowa State being 8-4 and be seen as a little bit more of a disappointment, but still be able to go to a decent bowl game and maybe win a bowl game.
What's up, Ideal? We appreciate you joining in and commenting on the show. We currently going over Iowa State floor and ceiling. Man, I'm looking at the schedule for Iowa State. Those first 3 weeks are critical. I know they got South Dakota week 1, but man, if they could scrape by K-State and Iowa, I think the schedule. I mean, their toughest games are almost. You could make an argument those are 2 of their tougher games of the whole schedule. Until you probably get Arizona State, BYU later in the year. I don't know how Colorado's going to look. They get Colorado on the road, and they get TCU on the road. Look, now thinking about it, the back half is kind of a little tougher than maybe what I have thought prior looking to it. I don't think they go undefeated. I don't see that ceiling. I'm leaning maybe towards the floor a little bit more for Iowa State. I think you said what you said for the floor, 8-4, maybe 9-3.
Yeah, so I mean, like my worst case scenario, like I had them going 8-4. Realistically, like I could see Iowa State kind of like splitting down the middle of what I have as a ceiling and a floor. Like kind of have them being as that like 10-2 team. Maybe like they drop a game in like in the non-conference play, and then maybe lose another game in conference play, and still be in that hunt for the Big 12 championship at the end of the year. But I mean, I look at the schedule at the same time, and I mean, for me, what I think of ceilings is there any games on there that they're likely not going to win? And I think for me, like the answer is no. I think all these games that you see here on the schedule for Iowa State, I think these are all winnable games. I mean, like I said before, like the Big 12, we don't know what's going to happen in the Big 12. We could be sitting here 7 months from now and Iowa State's 4-8. Like there's that kind of volatility in the conference. I'm not joking. I don't think that's going to happen. But I mean, I said the exact same thing about Utah last year when I did like my preseason ratings. Same thing for Florida State. Although I don't think anyone's expected Florida State to go 2-10. Like even though like the biggest like bum SU hater would not tell you 2-10 was a straight face, but I mean you just never know what's going to happen, especially in this conference. But it makes it very highly entertaining, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, my buddy Chris, man, he calls it the America's Conference because of the spreads are always so close, like NFL 2.5
Yeah,
spread, game spreads. I don't really don't know what to expect for the Big 12. It's kind of wide open, kind of like how you said for the national championship to start the show. Um, I can see 4 or 5 different teams winning it, to be honest. Uh, Me personally, I'm gonna go for Iowa State. I'm looking at their schedule. My final opinion as of now. I'm gonna go. I see 3 losses for sure. I think I'm gonna go like 8-4 though. I'm leaning closer to your floor for the Iowa State.
okay.
But
Boy, one of those losses from my Bearcats, right?
since
I could dream.
since Cincinnati opens up with a tough team, who they play week 1?
We're playing Nebraska, and they announced the kickoff time for that. That's a
Yeah,
9 o'clock kickoff. As an
yeah.
East Coaster, we're
So
gonna stand firm
you,
as the pre-Hawaii test.
you a Bengals fan?
Yeah, I'm a Bengals fan, and I'm a Bearcats fan.
Hell yeah, bro. Jamar Chase, bro, best wide receiver in the league, dog.
Hey, we certainly love him. We also love what you call it we love that Joe Burrow Jamar Chase connection.
So we got a comment right here. Question: do you think any of the bottom teams from last year, OK State, UCF, Arizona, or Utah, have a shot at winning the conference this year? Okay, Arizona, no. OK State, no. I don't know what Utah and UCF are going to be looking like, to be honest.
So I think so for me, I would say the best team that I think would have a chance is Utah. Now I know Utah was a team that, like I did mention, like did miss a bowl game, but they were a team that was really held back by by quarterback play, with Kim Rising being hurt, and then they kind of rotated quarterbacks throughout the year, and it was ugly. It was honestly really ugly to see Utah offensively. Now I think that they addressed this issue in the transfer portal. They got the quarterback out of New Mexico, who name does escape me, but I did watch him play a couple of times for those late night games. He was electric to watch. I do remember that. I'm just having complete brain fart on the name.
Yeah.
So I do have Utah being in that mix to potentially go to the Big 12 championship. I had them going 11-1 because I think just having average quarterback play with the kind of like physical team that Utah typically has, I think that's going to really show dividends. And just having an average offense is going to be a difference between all those close losses that they had last year and those losses turning into wins. And that could be one of the bigger stories of the season. It's just the turnaround that Utah has in 2025. So if I had to pick between those 4 below, I'm definitely going with Utah. I don't see Oklahoma State going to a bowl game once again. UCF, I think their best case is a 7-5 team. And like for Arizona, I also don't think they're going to go to a bowl game for a second year in a row. Just going off of what I've had dating back for like my spring projections.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Bengals better give Trey Henderson his money.
You know what? I would love that from the very bottom of my heart, but I also know that we have the cheapest owner on the face of the planet. And
Yeah.
so like I'm just used to being disappointed at this point when it comes to paying players.
From a fan perspective, it's just like eats you up, bro.
Yeah, it's just you're addicted to the to the pain. So I always refer to it as trauma bonding with my fellow Bengals fans.
All right, let's keep this floor ceiling thing rolling, man. I'm having fun with this one, man. Let's go second Big 12 team, TCU, Horned Frogs. All right, they got a tough little, interesting opener with UNC. What you thinking about TCU this year?
Yeah, so TCU, another one of those teams that the thing about TCU is I don't think that we're going to see that 2022 squad from TCU that made that run to the national championship game in spite of not even winning their own conference. But just taking a look at their team coming out of the transfer portal, window, they might have a starting 22 that could really make things interesting in the Big 12. Now, I don't see them as a team going to the Big 12 championship by any means, but I think they'll certainly be a team that will be in a mix. So I personally see them being as one of those teams that could be like a 9-3 team. But at the same time, though, if their passing offense does take a major step back, they did lose both Jack Beck and Savion Williams to the NFL. So losing your two top receivers is going to be difficult. And to their credit, they did try to address that in the portal. They did add Jordan Dyer, one of the better receivers out of the FCS level, but playing in one of the better FCS conferences in the Big Sky and playing in the Power Four, that transition isn't always a smooth transition, so to speak. So I could also see them missing a bowl game. I can see them going 5-7, but that's more of my floor personally. There's certainly a handful of games that I do think, could be considered, toss-ups in my opinion, particularly that North Carolina game, which, over under on how many shots we get of like Jordan Hudson on the sideline. Am I right?
You're right. Go 8.
We're gonna go 8.5.
8.5 for the over under right there.
But yeah, that's really the kind of feel that I have for TCU for sure, though.
So TCU, they return in Josh Hoover. He was explosive with the passing game last year. They lose Jack Beck. Their schedule, I'm looking at the schedule now. Their schedule is way tougher than Iowa State's, in my opinion.
I think so too, especially because they have SMU. That'll be a tough game.
At West Virginia, they get Baylor. I don't think Iowa State had Baylor. They add Arizona State. Iowa State gets Arizona State at home. They got SMU at North Carolina. I don't know.
Yeah, and then their last 4 weeks of the season, like you mentioned, got Iowa State at home, BYU on the road, Houston. Listen, I don't think Houston's going to be one of those teams that's going to compete for a Big 12 championship by any means, but I think they're going to be an improved outfit from 2024. And Cincinnati, I know Cincinnati, you're going to have them at home, but the Bearcats should be a more improved outfit, at least to the point where their floor is going to be higher than what we saw for their 2024 version, especially if we saw the first half version of like Brandon Sorsby in the first half of the year, not the second half version of Brandon Sorsby.
So you said 9-3 ceiling, 5-7 floor.
Yeah, so that's what I'm tracking to. Was I think they're going to be close to that 9-3, but I just have concerns for their passing game just from what they lost from the NFL.
Me too. This schedule is just way too tough for my liking. I'm gonna go in the middle of your ceiling and floor. I must project maybe in the 7-5.
Okay.
7-5. I don't 8-4 maybe a little bit, but that schedule is just brutal. I think we're gonna see. They're gonna have to really replace their weapons, and that's a brutal schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree. At least by Big 12 standards, I think this is a more difficult schedule, particularly on the like in the second half of the year. And we didn't even talk about Kansas State. They got to go on the road to play against Kansas State as well.
I was just looking at the schedule. That one just completely went over my head. And they got Kansas State on the road, dog.
Yeah,
come on, bro. That's a tough. Dude, they got one of the toughest schedules in the country. I feel like for their standards,
Yeah, at least like definitely one of the more difficult schedules in the Big 12. It's not going to be easy. But again, I think they could certainly be in the mix and just be a part of some very exciting Big 12 football, man.
Big 12 is going to be so fun to keep up with this year, man. Oh my God. Let's jump out the Big 12. Let's go to the SEC now. All right, you got two teams I want to talk about. First one, Missouri. Missouri's a very slept-on team, man. Eli Drinkwitz, phenomenal coach. He's been hitting 10-win seasons. Just they don't get much love. Now, their schedule last year was easy. A lot of people kind of credit their 10-win season to the easiness of their schedule. So I didn't even check out their schedule yet, so I'm pulling that up now. What you thinking about Missouri?
So I mean, listen, like for Missouri, all credit in the world to what they were able to do in the transfer portal, as well as kind of the culture that EY Drinkwitz does have out there at Missouri. Um, Listen, they did have one of the easier schedules in the SEC, and there's the argument made of you are what your record says you are. That's being made sometimes. That's simply not true. Missouri, was one of those teams that they beat who they were supposed to beat, but when they went up against tougher competition, like your Alabamas of the world, your upper echelon of the SEC, they got exposed, and this happened on multiple occasions for the Missouri Tigers last year. Now, with that being said, I really love their defense this upcoming season.
Yes.
I think it's going to be one of the best defenses in America in 2025. They were already coming back with 76% of their defensive production returning for this upcoming season. And that's not even accounting for what they brought in through the transfer portal, at least defensively. They also brought in Damon Wilson, edge rusher out of Georgia, one of the best pickups in the transfer portal. I think he was like number 3 overall in the transfer portal, behind Nico and somebody else. And then they also brought in the edge rusher out of Appalachian State in Nate Johnson. So this is going to be one of those teams that I think is going to be extremely lethal defensively. And that defense is going to keep Missouri in every single game that they play. Now, their question is going to be, what's that offense going to be looking like? Brady Cook is gone. He's no longer with Missouri. He moved on as an undrafted free agent. And they also lose both of their starting tackles as well. Amar Menbu and Marcus Bryant, they're both gone. They both left for the NFL as well. So they're going to need to replace both of their starting tackles. And also Bo Pribula, the transfer quarterback out of Penn State. How is he, as a full-time quarterback? I've heard very good things about him. Highly recruited in the transfer portal, decides on going to Missouri. But, that's all hypotheticals offensively. So I think how far Missouri goes this year is going to be dependent on how soon do things come together on the offensive side of the ball. If things really do come together on the offensive side of the ball, it's an above average to a good offense this year. I think Missouri could win possibly every single game on their schedule this fall. I mean, for SEC standards, I like how their schedule breaks out. They're going to go 4-0 in their non-conference games. I see them beating Central Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana, UMass. I'm not going to speak too much on them. Their 3 toughest games that they're going to have, South Carolina, Alabama, Texas A&M, they get all of those games at home. That's going to be on their home field this fall. Their only road games that, could give them second thoughts, at Auburn. Auburn should be an improved outfit this upcoming year. That could be a tricky game. At Oklahoma, what does that offense look like for them this upcoming year? But I could see a world where Missouri wins every single game, or at least that's what my ceiling would be. Now, with that being said, if Bo ends up being a bust, then this could also be a team that could struggle to go to a bowl game and be kind of like that 6-6 stratosphere. That offense just does not come together at all. Because you got to think, because you're talking about the transfer portal, some guys coming in after spring practice, you're going to have a little bit more volatility when relying on the transfer portal. So we'll see how that turns out. I have them at 12-0 as a ceiling, 6-6 is my floor. Realistically, I'll probably shoot the gap in terms of an actual record prediction of 9-3. But I think all the games on their schedule will certainly be winnable for sure.
Now they get the backup quarterback from Penn State. He has no starting experience, I don't think, right?
He does not. He's been sitting behind Drew Auer, which there isn't very many quarterbacks in the country, at least at the collegiate level, that would start above Drew Auer, to be completely fair to him. But, as you mentioned, no starting experience. So, I mean, he's duty, but
the offense does scare me a little bit. If the offensive line comes together, they're going to lean on toting the rock for sure. They picked up a really good running back from ULM.
Yes, Ahmad Hardy. Yes,
bro. That dude's a bruiser, bro. I think they're gonna lean on the Rock. If they could get that passing game fixed, I'm leaning with the 9-3 projection. Their schedule from SEC standards is pretty favorable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the easier like SEC schedules for sure. And
They get
like, speaking of that passing game, they did also bring in Kevin Coleman out of Mississippi State, who was a bright spot on that Bulldogs team as well last year. So they do have him. That could be their wide receiver one.
I got them losing to Alabama and Auburn, and South Carolina is going to be a tricky one. They get them at home, I think, but towards the end of the year, you know how they got the Oklahoma on the road at the end of the year. We don't know what Oklahoma got a wide range of projections as well. They might be without their head coach and not playing from not much at the end of the year too. Same with Arkansas, their last two games. So I think the way that the schedule falls, it falls pretty solid for Missouri. How you feel about that at Auburn game for Missouri?
Yeah, I mean that at Auburn game can certainly be a tricky game for them as well. I have that as a losable game in my opinion, especially coming off of playing Alabama. Even at home, that's gonna be. We know what Alabama is gonna be. Especially because Kalen DeBoer, he's gonna go through his first full year with the Crimson Tide. He came in late in the process, so. Last year's Alabama team, they had to do spring practice and the summer practices a little bit differently just to make sure that they actually kept guys, because there's not a lot of, players that go in the transfer portal that meet the Alabama standard, right? But there's, a lot of players on Alabama that if they enter the transfer portal, a lot of people will be going after. So they had to do, spring and summer practices in a different way. And I think we saw that on the field, especially with, being blown out by Oklahoma, like inexplicably towards the end of the season and losing that bowl game to Michigan, even though, Jalen Milroe and other NFL prospects that were on that roster, they didn't opt out of that game. They actually played in it, and they lost to a team that didn't know how to pass the ball last year. So I expect Alabama to be certainly like a physical team. That could really drain them. And Auburn, they might not be a slouch. So that 2-game stretch there in mid-October, that could be a tricky 2-game stretch.
And then you follow that up with Vanderbilt on the road. Vandy, we don't really. They had a good year last year, Vanderbilt. We'll see if they can repeat success. And then A&M. A&M's another little tricky game. A&M and South Carolina are kind of like the two tricky games. And then Auburn and Alabama are going to be the two tough games, I feel like.
Yeah, and Mike Elko, he's certainly going to do everything in his power to improve his defensive unit, because he was very vocal about how porous their defense played towards the end of the season last year. And so Mike Elko, being more of a defensive-minded coach, that defense could be looking scary as well. And they also had Marcel Reed, who's a very exciting player to watch as well. That could make things interesting as well. So I mean, it's the SEC. Like it's a tough level of competition. But I mean, again, like I think there's no game on here where you just sit there and you think to yourself, wow, there is very little chance that they're gonna lose that game. Like there's games I think they're probably going to lose, but you're going to probably write that down in pencil. You're not writing an L in pen by any means. So that makes any sense.
Eli Drinkwitz, bro. I'm a big fan of Eli. I think he's a phenomenal coach. Coming from App State and just the success he's been having at Missouri kind of proves it.
Yeah, and at least like keeping them, somewhat relevant, like especially making that transition over from the Big 12 to the SEC, like from a long-term perspective. Like it'd be easy to get lost, so to speak. But I mean, Missouri, they're certainly make things interesting. They haven't won the SEC yet, but they're a team that you also can't just roll your headgear out and just assume you're going to beat them either.
Yeah. So all right, man, that was a fun segment, the floor and ceilings, man. I had fun with that segment. Let's jump into our final, and we're going to close out with this one. And I'm really interested and curious to see what you have here. Give me your top 5 project. As of now, things could change. We're still a little early in the summer, but give me your top 5 defenses projected.
All right.
or 25.
All right. So my first forwards, I felt pretty comfortable with. I was having a difficult time finding a fifth. I think there's going to be a lot of really good defensive units out there
Okay.
that make it really difficult to, pick a fifth, so to speak. But what I ended up settling on, so for number 5, I have Missouri, which we actually just finished talking about them. Missouri, already having like 76% of that defensive returning production, plus those key transfer portal grabs, Damon Wilson and Nate Johnson being added to an already experienced defense. I think that's going to be if they end up going undefeated, that's going to be a reason why. It's because I think that defense is going to be elite. I have them as my number 5 defense in the country. At number 4, I have Alabama, which even with kind of being a little bit on the lighter side in terms of how they handle spring and summer practice, just to make sure that kids stick around, they still end up finishing 9th in the nation in terms of defensive points per game. Listen, Alabama, there are very few rosters in the country that can compete with the talent, 1-for-1, with the Alabama Crimson Tide. And so with this being the real first year and he can really ramp things up in his vision, I think that defensive unit is going to take another step forward and go from being that top 10 unit to being a top 5 unit and really being seen as, one of those teams that could win the national championship just with the amount of talent that they have on that roster. Staying in the SEC, I got Tennessee at number 3.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, Tennessee. Listen, I mean, this is another one of those teams that had a top 10 defensive unit last year in terms of points per game allowed, and they returned 67% of their returning production on the defensive side of the ball. So it may not show in terms of box scores because that offense, who knows what's going to happen there with the Nico situation. I think that's going to be a type of team that's going to lean on that running game a little bit more, even with Dylan Sampson leaving for the NFL ultimately, and then also relying on that defense that returns 67% of a team that finished in the top 10. I mean, there's only one team that really embarrassed them on the defense side of the ball. It was Ohio State, but you saw what Ohio State did in that entire playoff. That was a Death Star. Nobody was beating Ohio State in that playoff run. It just wasn't going to happen. So I had Penn State at number 3. Number 2, I got Penn State. So I know that they are going to lose Abdul Carter, who is going to be a generational pass rusher in the NFL. He is an insanely talented kid. But Penn State, has a lot of really good defensive talent returning. They returned half of their starters. They also had a pretty good transfer portal haul, even though there wasn't a numerous number of transfer portal hauls. Plus, you just got the best, arguably the best defensive coordinator in the nation in Jim Knowles, and his resume absolutely speaks for himself. Yep. Depending on, even going back to Oklahoma State in a time where, the Big 12 could not spell defense. They could not spell it, my man. And he turned Oklahoma State into a respectable defensive outfit. He went to Ohio State, going to an offensive-minded program that, Ryan Day had there at the time, turned them into an elite defensive outfit, one that had literally the entire defensive line drafted in the NFL. And now he goes to Penn State and really gets to bring that aggressive style of defense with guys that are always hungry to get to the quarterback. I think Penn State's going to be aggressive defensively and really reinforces the point where, not saying that like it's now or never, but if Penn State is going to win a national title in this decade, this is the best time to do it. Yep. Especially the questions at Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, all these other places around the country, winning that Big Ten and winning a national championship crown. This is James Franklin's best chance, I think, in the 2020s decade. So I have them at number 2. If in number one, I got Notre Dame. I got the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. I love the culture that Marcus Freeman is building. Very strong defensive-minded coach, even dating back to when he was a defensive coordinator at Cincinnati, really helped the development of key guys like Sauce Gardner, like Kobe Bryant for those late 2010 teams and the like the 20 and 21 team that was knocking on the door to college football playoff, ultimately making it as a group of 5 team, the only top 4 team that the group of 5 had at least to this point since 2014. We've seen his work continue as defensive coordinator at Notre Dame and now as a head coach for a few years now. They returned 66% of their defensive production as well. They finished as a top 5 defense in the nation last year in points per game, because that's really the most important thing. You could do whatever you want in between the 20s. I don't care. But if I'm stopping you from getting into the end zone and making you settle for field goals, that's always going to be a win for me. And overall, I just love the culture that Marcus Freeman is building. We hardly see that in modern college football anymore. Like just the sheer togetherness of that unit. I think we saw it on full display in that college football playoff run. So I have Notre Dame as my number 1 defense, with Penn State at 2, Tennessee at 3, Alabama at 4, and then Missouri is going to round things out as part of my top 5.
The Tennessee and Missouri is very interesting, especially with the offense tied to how good the defense is going to be,
Yeah, I mean, you could always argue that, like opposite, if the defense holds you back, then, I mean, that could always limit you offensively as well, making you a little bit more one-sided. So, I mean, that's what football is, it's a team sport. So, offensive, defense always go hand in hand.
I'm curious to hear a couple honorable mentions. Maybe you want to throw out a couple honorable mentions to the audience.
Oh yeah, we can we can certainly throw out some honorable mentions. Man, like I said, it was really difficult to come out here and think of what I want to do in terms of honorable mentions. I thought about Ohio State. I mean, you can't ignore the fact that they still have the best defensive player in the country, and Caleb Downs really reminds me of a great value brand, like Sean Taylor almost, in terms of his aggressiveness on the defensive side of the ball. Texas was another one that I also thought about, but I just thought Texas lost too much talent on the defensive side to really put them in there. I mean, that was just a couple of teams that I was thinking about. Georgia. Georgia is a team that always seems stout defensively. It didn't live up to the Georgia standard last year. Does Kirby Smart get him back up there? We'll see. Might be harder because we have this NIL and transfer portal era. Thought about it, but again, just too many questions for Georgia. But that's just a few teams that I just thought of off the top of my head that I was considering to put in there. But for in case of those 3 teams, thought they lost too much over the course of the offseason.
Hey man, that was some great analysis. We just hit an hour mark on the show, so we're gonna wrap it up right here. We appreciate you, man. Any given Saturday, tell the audience where to find you and follow, subscribe, any of that type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So as of right now, any given Saturday, that is, we are only on Twitter as of right now. We are considering going on to the YouTube platform as well eventually, which if that does happen, just got to see, where I'm at in terms of making sure that, my son is taken care of and has what he needs, make sure that my wife is taken care of. As a father, that's 2 of my, really important things in my life, as of right now. But if we do go on the YouTube, we'll have an announcement, from the the Twitter account down below, which is Any Given Saturday. And that's where you can see all my other content, throughout the off season. And we certainly have some things planned, when we get into the thick of things over the course of the actual college football season.
Yes, sir. Well, we'll stay in touch, man. I'm sure we're gonna run some more shows in the future. So we appreciate you. On that note, we'll close out.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate it.
Hell yeah.